the internet is about to reach a new evolutionary stage. It's getting more decentralized, but it's also merging between online and physical. But, you know, this question still remains. Is the Metaverse and Web3, are they doing anything better? Is it actually going to get better? Or, to put it in other words, are the few monopolistic internet giants are actually going to rule furthermore and even increase their influence? These questions we are going to ask in our next panel.
And we are thrilled to have three amazing experts here with us that we can ask this question. They will share their insights about Web3 and the Metaverse with us. Let's welcome on stage Lili Feyerabend, Lililashka. She is an NFT pioneer who has been building projects on the Ethereum blockchain since 2018. She's a full-stack product designer with extensive experience in decentralized finance and digital art. That's why she dreams about a world that is more decentralized, free and fair. Great to have you with us, Lili.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Also, welcome Yingzi. Yuan, who is the founder and president of the Metaverse Summit and also the co-founder of the collective Virtuals. She's also an expert for extended reality and Web3 at Ubisoft Strategic Innovation Lab. And her mission is to explore new tech which will reshape the entertainment and actually answer the question how the Metaverse would look like for us as users. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And last but not least, Alexander Lange has joined us. He is a founder and general partner at Inflection. That's an early-stage venture capital firm investing in Web3 and the open economy. Alex is a lawyer and an economist with an interesting background, and he started his career at one of those major internet companies at Google in 2012. Now he's an investor and he's fighting for a different internet, as he will tell us in a minute. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks a lot for having me and pulling this all together, despite the last-minute obstacles here. I'm pretty amazed.
Thanks.
But before we enter the discussion, we're very excited to have all of us three speakers tell us how they actually imagine the Metaverse to be. Alex, let's start with you and your lightning talk. How to build about the building blocks of Web3 and how you as a venture capitalist actually look at it and what you're looking for.
Sure. Before doing that, I'd like to briefly touch on a couple of definitions, as there's still a lot of confusion around the terms Web3 and the term the Metaverse and how they relate to one another. So I quickly checked out Wikipedia, where Web3 is defined as a stateful, decentralized and machine-readable internet run on public blockchains, what I find to be quite simple yet abstract, but good enough. I'm struggling a little bit more with the current, I guess, public narrative around what the Metaverse is and could be. So as of today, again on Wikipedia, it's defined as an iteration of the internet where users can interact with a computer-generated environment and other users supporting persistent 3D interfaces. And in my view, that definition is a little bit too narrow and lacks context. And that's mainly because the Metaverse is composed of multiple technologies and not only Web3, which is one tiny element out of it. So we should expand this definition a little bit more. And while talking about the Metaverse, referring to it as an expansion of the internet of information towards finance, public services and governance, by leveraging XR technologies, interfaces, AI and crypto coordination technologies, I think would be more suitable. Talking about before jumping into the building blocks, I think it's very relevant to look at the fundamental design principles potentially underpinning such metaverse. So looking at the y-axis here, there are a couple of things we can use to differentiate between closed systems and open systems. For example, open systems in that sense are coordinated through open source protocols, whereas closed systems are coordinated through gigantic corporations. Ownership is very user-centric and stakeholder-centric in these open design systems and much more shareholder-oriented in closed systems. The economies in the open world are bottom-up and driven by free market principles. as opposed to centrally planned like in gigantic bureaucracies and so on. And really depending on which of the, or how we apply these design principles to each layer within the stack, we're going to end up with very different outcomes, which I try to summarize in one picture. So I believe in closed systems, we're going to end up with artificial, centrally planned world resembling Disneyland, whereas in more openly designed worlds, we're going to have a more organic way of interacting with these systems, designing and building them. And that's basically the future I'm betting on as an investor for various reasons. I think there's a certain pattern we've also seen with internet innovations being composable and just growing faster, having network effects, etc. And I don't want to bore you with too many details here. There's actually an old slide, but the metaverse is going to be composed of various different layers spanning a hardware layer, including key management, mining, connectivity, and then on top of that, the whole stack for distributed compute, including peer-to-peer networking technologies, what we describe, like other ones we describe as layer ones, that's key core blockchain infrastructure, and various others. And we just started to see the use cases unfolding on top of these two base layers. So it all started with open money in the form of Bitcoin, and then since 2020, there's rising momentum and adoption around open finance, or others call it DeFi. And currently, everybody in the room has probably followed the first wave of NFT innovation that is reshaping large parts of the creator economy and the gaming and media environments overall. And as of today, it's still a little bit hidden, but we're seeing a lot of very early stage projects trying to innovate around open marketplace designs and governance designs. There are always new narratives coming up, and the frequency of them showing up is going to increase, or is increasing over time. And talking a little bit about my personal role as an investor, I think that crypto technologies are here really to disintermediate all kinds of markets, and that started already with money, it started already with finance, and I don't see any reason of why this wouldn't happen with venture capital particularly as well. What is good news for everyone. And the harbingers of that are that currently you already see a very compressed time window for private capital allocations. So as opposed to companies running in private mode for 10 years plus before there's an IPO, we have these new kind of ways of financing and launching software that allow people to participate, and particularly users and supply-side service providers of these networks, to get exposure to the network's underlying asset much earlier. So it's basically democratizing access to these kinds of assets. And as an effect of this trend, I believe that VCs will transform themselves away from rather passive market participants towards builders. So the role of builders and venture capitalists will merge over time. And I believe that access to capital, access to talent, as well as demand side and supply side services will be supplied by this new breed of innovators. And last but not least, there's one big outstanding topic you mentioned already in the introduction. That is concentrated ownership, and this is a really big problem, as we've started to think about broader distribution of ownership in these networks from the get-go at network launch and the few years after. But what we don't know yet is how the ownership structures in those networks will behave over longer time periods. And there are a few things we could do to optimize, particularly around what I call ownership-sensitive governance. We can dive into that later. And continuous issuance, meaning that there's going to be a continuous dilution of ownership, always redistributing assets from the core of the network towards new users or supply-side services. So those are three big topics I'd be happy to discuss a little bit with you.
As Alex said, Metaverse is a pretty huge thing. One of the parts of the Metaverse might hopefully be the technologies that we sum up as Web3. Now, the exciting, why we are so excited to have you with us, that you are working like on the convergence of extended reality technology, gaming, but also NFTs and the blockchain world. So maybe you could give us some insights about what you're thinking about the metaverse or the metaverses that exist right now and how this could play out in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Wolfgang, and thank you, Alex. It's a really clear introduction. I wouldn't have to actually explain what it is. I think it's pretty clear for the audience as well. And I think my understanding and my story with Metaverse is really kind of personal as well. In the beginning, actually, I was in the film industry, which is neither high-tech nor very creative. Sometimes the production procedure is like very logistical and operational, right? But what I like is about stories. It's always about people and stories, right? Even afterwards, when I fell in love with high-tech, with all the different possibility of storytelling, meaning even with gaming tools, even with, for example, gaming engines, you can produce linear content or audiovisual content. And also, for example, if you can distribute your content through virtual reality in an interactive way or in a 360-degree way, right? That is makes some difference to the story itself and to the feeling, to the, how do you say, to make how people feel and make people how to remember about it. So that's how I enter into Metaverse. So as you introduced, I work also for Ubisoft in Strategic Innovation Lab. So basically, I've been studying Metaverse for like 3 years, way before all the change of name of Facebook and all the buzzword around it. Why I was interested about it, because it's about how people it's gonna live, how people is gonna be connected and interact with each other as well. Before, we have all this top-down storytelling made by a producer and a filmmaker, and then they tell you what is the right way to consume content and to produce content, right? And now, with Web2, we have all this creativity and simple way of producing things, of the creator economy. We have tools, we have social media, everybody can be a YouTuber, everybody can be Instagrammer, or everybody even can be a virtual star, meaning that you have all these 3D tools that are democratized, that are at your disposal in a very easy way at a very low price. So this kind of ways, people can actually be the creator, be the developer themselves. So this created the space for the so-called metaverse. And that's how I enter into it. And also, afterwards, of course, the huge potential of Web3 and the blockchain is deblocking the creativity of a lot of people too. For instance, in Web2, we will have this social media, but in the end, the data and the tools and all the available content are decided by the platform. And the way they monetize it is actually by using your data and then by deciding each frame, each moment, what are you seeing and what are you creating, right? So this is still a pretty top-down approach of how humans interact and how users can create. But with the Web3 tool, I think the decentralization is really a killer tool. For example, if the Facebook, the Google, and the Amazon, they don't own our data, and then we can freely express ourselves. We can decide the governance behind those platforms. It will be really the future, and the future of Metaverse should be decentralized in this way. For example, just one example that I've been following for like almost 3 years. So there is this new business model called virtual idols, or let's say maybe in some cases called a digital human, depending on the photorealism of the character of the avatar. So this business model has been emerging for almost 3 years. And it is kind of the beginning of the metaverse because, as I said, everything is about human. And then we want to identify ourselves inside of the metaverse, and we want the virtual avatars or virtual selves to interact with the others, right? So with Web3 tools and Web3 protocols, recently a very famous virtual Instagrammer called Lili actually is backed by a DAO. So the fans and the community can actually decide what they are going to see in the story and how they are going to interact. So they are like self-organizing. This is a sign, I would say, that I see a transformation from Web2 business model and Web2 values and Web2 way of working, Web2 user experience. User experience, the word itself is really like a Web2 world, right? Because they decide what your experience is, and you are the user. And nowadays, we're transitioning to decentralized governance, and also we can also own our own avatar. Imagine that. How amazing is that? And that has a very strong link with the whole business model of a gaming industry, right? Because in the traditional gaming industry, the producer, the publisher decide what you are playing, what the world looked like, what's the style. But now, as a member of the community, you can build your own thing, and then you can actually have ownership over it. Meaning that before, if you spend money inside of a game on the in-game currency, it is locked inside of the system. But now you can actually cash out, and then your time and energy and passion and fun and all those things can be monetized, and then you have a different motivation. That's the most important thing for me. So I hope we can see all the innovations emerging, and we can bring more people from Web2 to Web3 and to build together this beautiful future of Metaverse.
One of the early adopters of the crypto scene, would you like to share with us your vision of the Internet of the future, please?
Yeah, sure. So I have with me a short slides for this. So I think Alex and Yingzi already gave us a really, really good introduction of what Metaverse is, right? What I'm going to say here is probably the best to elaborate one of the use case that I believe like everyone here have heard of before. So it's NFT, short for non-fungible token. So maybe I can just explain a little bit what is an NFT, right? So there are like a lot of definitions of NFTs, culturally, like philosophically, technologically. I would say that NFT is, in a nutshell, it is a technology that allows like people or anyone to own a digital file. And the important part of this is about ownership, right? Because this ownership is registered on the blockchain, which means that it inherits several characteristics such as a permissionlessness, trustlessness, data provenance, transparency. And so because of all these characteristics, it allows, or basically it triggers the new, I would say, a paradigm, or even, a new culture, a new movement, so to say, right? A new movement in a way where the creator and the collectors are in the center of attention. They're actually being empowered like during this movement, and instead of like the middleman, for example, like Facebook or all the bigger platform, right? That usually their basically life or income would depending on them. And that's why NFT is cool. So, okay. So if you bought into that statement, so let's move on to the second slide. So now we're going to see from a very high level view, right? Now we're talking about the old web, or as Yingzi have mentioned in the Web 2, and now we are currently in the state of transitioning to the Web 3, which people could call, like, okay, this is a decentralized web or more decentralized web. So what are the differences here? So in the old web, the idea is that we are competing for attention, right? And therefore, the product that coming out of it, there are analytics, ads, network, because attention is a currency there. But then, when we are transitioning to the new paradigm, as I mentioned before, a decentralized web, what are we competing for? We are competing for contribution. And this is very, very important, because when you talk about contribution, you're talking about something that is much more meaningful, right? Like Yingzi has mentioned, it is a kind of thing that coming from a different motivation, like contribution. When you think about it, the products that coming out of this competition is, for example, a DAO or even an NFT projects, but like it's being built from the grassroots community that is more community driven. And I think this is super mind-blowing. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so this is obviously the great time to experiment, because you do not need to be an employee or executive of like one of the biggest company in the world to be able to experiment. You can basically sit in a basement with your 2 best friends and create like one of the biggest company in the world. Like you have basically a shot to do that, right? And so I would also like to mention one of the case study, which is my project. I think it's great. So I don't know if it's illegal here, but we just launched light paper yesterday with a link. So basically, what we are doing, so our project is an NFT project, obviously. It's called Crypto Manga. Why I think it's cool is because this is the order that we plan to do things, right? And I would say that our approach is called the NFT, in brackets, game reverse engineering. So the first thing that we do ever is basically we start selling game items. Game items without building a game, right? So imagine that, like, you don't have a game. We started off by selling an item in a game, and a lot of people bought it. Okay, so it was really successful job. Happy about it. So then we could raise some fund. Basically we start selling game items, right? So how it works is like this. People like, okay, see, oh, this is cool game items. We're telling them like pretty vaguely, okay, what we're gonna do, and they kind of believe in us. And like, you know, obviously I've been in a space for half a decade, which is equal to maybe like 20 years in the normal world. So once people have our game items, automatically people starting to group together around our project, right? Also, obviously because of shared passion, but also because they feel like they have invested in us already and they don't want us to disappear, right? So they kind of like, hey, we gather around you, we already have your assets. Then automatically we can start building a community, because people, they already have these assets, like a lot of people have, and they were just, okay, you know, like we have our main goal to increase the value of these assets, right? How are we gonna do it? Like, you know, are you gonna make this happen, or we just gonna help you make this happen together as a community? So we're currently kind of like at this phase right now, like we already have our Discord community, we have several thousand followers on Twitters, and then we and this group of our, I would say, community members right now, we basically convene every day in this metaverse, right, to talk about how can we improve this project, what direction should we take. This is even before we starting a DAO. This is like a group chat, right, of people who already have the assets. Once we already have this community, the next step that we plan to do, which you can read more details in the light paper, we want to trigger a network effect. And the way we want to do it is that we are building a minimum version of a game, which is platformless, and it is going to be on Twitter. So basically, you do not need to learn a new pattern, like how to play a game anymore. If you know how to tweet, you know how to play a game. And basically, this is the game that we want to build. And then because the game itself, the technique is woven into how Twitter works, right? Because it's a social media and the game is on the platform, you can tweet directly to the bot. We hope that this will help trigger a network effect. And once, if this works, then we will start building a game. So this is, I find, quite fascinating, right? Because in the olden times, how you would do it is that you would start first by building a game. You may start like, you know, spend maybe 2-3 years or even more, right? Spend a lot of money raising fund, building a game. And once you have a game, or when a game is about to finish, you would love to trigger a network effect. You will pour the money in the marketing and all these advertisement. You want all the influencer to talk about your game, right? And once you have done it successfully, then you want to start building a community, because then people know about your game. They are aware that your game exists. And so therefore, once you have a community, then people are start playing your game. After, the last thing is that you can sell game items in game. And this is how it works always. And what we are doing right now is, although currently is an experiment, but we actually reverse engineer the whole thing, and we hopefully that it would work. And yeah, yes, go read our white paper.
Check out the white paper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lili. Thanks for these 3 insights. I think we had 3 great perspectives. And you said a lot of great stuff, but we still have some questions left.
That is true. But it's amazing to see how much passion all of you have talking about the Web3 and the Metaverse. And it kind of seems that there's the unique chance to build the internet from scratch and make it the right way. But having said that, what do you actually think how you can do it, or is it possible given the fact that the major corporations still own the content, but they also kind of own the infrastructure everything runs on? So maybe all of you can have a kind of have your view on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's directly connected with Lili's approach to building this game. So this idea of issuing an asset representing an avatar in a game, representing a book, a piece of content, text, video, doesn't matter. You can really abstract this idea of giving away any kind of asset and let your audiences basically create experiences around this, so that there wouldn't necessarily be just one game. In theory, there could be 1,000 games built atop of this initial asset that has been distributed to a core group of people by whatever kind of mechanism. And this whole, I'd say this whole idea applies now to any sort of content that might be attached to a public-private key pair or a digital identity, whatever you wanna call this, and that's how I believe the infrastructure of these next generation social media networks will look like. To give you a very simple example, today, if you have an account on Facebook and at some point you're sick of the company, you want to go elsewhere, and you would like to take your messaging history, your calendar, your social graph, your friends' messages, everything with you to something, say, like LinkedIn. That simply wouldn't be possible. There is no way to basically extract that data and upload it into another system in a frictionless manner. But in Web3, it would be exactly that. So you would basically control your key pair where all kinds of informations are attached to. This could be like real-world attributes, like whatever your age or your name or your address and your history of online behavior. You can always create new keys, so it's always going to be pseudonymous, I believe. And then whenever you're sick of one interface, you just go to another interface, click a button, connect the service with your key pair, and basically have all the information magically teleported into that new interface. And this is already available today with all these different DeFi protocols, for example, or in Metaverse terms, if you checked out projects like Decentralized or CryptoVoxels, for example, you can easily like move back and forth between these worlds using your Ethereum key pair. And I think this is probably going to take us at least a decade to get to like mainstream adoption and a same or even much higher degree of utility of these next generation social networks. But this is how I would say we're gonna put the user back at the center of technologies and not making him an exploitable asset.
Thanks for this, but maybe Lili and Yingzi, maybe you could. Because in theory that sounds perfect, but billions of people are already logged into a system that combines Facebook, the Messenger, Instagram, now the Metaverse by Meta. So if it stays so convenient for people to just stay logged in the Web2 world, what will be like the killer application or the one thing that really makes mass adoption of this Web3 applications? What do you think? Because even your game relies on Twitter now.
Yeah, that's true. Skip that part.
Our conference.
Yeah.
I think there will be more than one killer use cases, because as we have been kind of experiencing it in the past year. I think we have one new killer use case every year. I think last year was definitely DeFi, and this year is NFT.
Decentralized finance.
Exactly, yeah. So last year was decentralized finance, where you can do like a lot of things similarly to traditional finance, but then you can do it in a decentralized way. So that was actually pretty cool because, for example, usually when you are like want to invest in an IPO, right, you usually need to be an accredited investor, and that would entail that you need to have a certain amount of income per year in order to, you know, like do the test and like have that sort of, I don't know, certification. But then for normal people, for normies, basically, it's just impossible to invest in IPO unless you're doing via the app, right?
I think, yeah, IPOs are special, but let's talk about private markets, maybe in venture capital. Like, also, I can only onboard accredited investors in the US, and yeah, exactly. So it's a very exclusive, you know, kind of industry that privatizes gains early on and basically leaves the downside to the broader public.
Yeah, but on the other hand, right, we are living in the exact same society where you do not need to have, you know, a lot of income to be able to go to the gambling hall, right? And it's not the best thing, right? Basically, when you compare that two things, I think and DeFi is really awesome because you do not need that. You do not need to earn a lot of money to be able to participate in some of the sales, which obviously is coming with do your own research, right? Because it's also high risk and obviously high return in a lot of cases. And because this year is kind of NFT, so DeFi was like super cool and NFT as well. NFT is I think it's definitely a technology where we could kind of empower the creative community, right? It's not only just about creator, it's about like the whole flow of like, okay, what about, you know, an NFT producers? What about like all these like collectors that is turning into like more digital? So I think there's definitely more than one killer use case for the decentralized world.
Yingzi, maybe could a game be the killer app?
That's the right answer.
Okay, I thought so.
So actually, I totally agree with Lili and Alex, and I think in the end, when we are talking about gaming, we are talking about the traditional way of making a game, meaning that when we call it reverse engineering, it was because beforehand the game is financed top down, and then we decide what to produce, and we decide what people would like to play maybe one day after the production, and then we are kind of betting on what we decided already, right? And in the end, it's gonna be more and more common, this kind of way of production, meaning that you ask people what they want, and then they finance it, and then they already have part of the assets and the right to play it, and also you make the game together with them. That will become more and more easy, and then more and more common. And maybe Lili, you'll be the front runner, one of the first out of it, right? So Wolfgang, that's the right answer, and I do believe that gaming is the big opportunity. It's the opportunity to onboard the next billion of users onto crypto, onto blockchain. And because when we were talking about crypto in 2020, 2018, people are very confused about it, and then they don't know what's the use case. But when you put it in the game use case, it's very evident. People will be like, okay, I own the thing, and then I am good at it. I spend time on it, I spend energy on it, and then now I can monetize all the things. It's very easy to understand, and also there are a lot of connections between the gaming community and the crypto community, and they are very connected. But in this sense, I would also want to say that the future of game might not be the game we're playing today. It might be a more decentralized virtual world, as the example you mentioned, the Decentraland or the Sandbox. These kind of games, they give people tools. They give people kind of the whole context, and then people will just be rushing in and be creating their houses, their social network, their way of working. People actually do work in this kind of virtual world for the others already. Or also maybe they are selling digital art or even like a traditional art on top of this platform, right? So I do think this is the opportunity to onboard Web2 people into Web3. And your question was about like there are already a lot of established players and how can the newcomers be part of it. I do think there is a kind of a fight, a war between Web2 tech giants and game giants trying to onboard Web3 protocols and elements, for example, NFT. And the Web3 protocols, for example, Solana, I was in their conference, and Near, these kind of protocols, they are trying to bring in more developers and also more builders, more projects like you, Lili, into their ecosystem to build things on top of it that is crypto native. So let's see, let's wait for the result of the fight for Metaverse.
Good question to follow up on what you just said, because we talk about definitions already, right? And the term the metaverse comes or was coined in the science fiction novels, like Ready Player One, Snow Crash, and now we talk about it in the context of Web3, decentralization. How does this two worlds come together? And maybe is a follow-up on that, how do you really imagine, you already started to talk, about how the physical and digital world could actually merge for real. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. So there are a lot of different visions and different definitions, different value around Metaverse. For instance, around the link between physical world and virtual world, there are a lot of different visions. For instance, Niantic CEO just said yesterday, I think, in the news that he thinks Niantic is going to build a metaverse that is like linking directly physical with virtual, meaning that using augmented reality, AR technology. So people will be at the same time be in contact with the real environment and real people, but having those 3D assets in an augmented reality format, right? So that is one version. And then there are so many different visions around it too. So personally, I do think that the future of the so-called metaverse is not everybody having this VR headset and then wandering around or communicating with each other only in this way. I think the technology, the hardware technology is evolving very quickly, and the 3D production technology, the real-time virtual production technology are evolving as quickly as, let's say, everything concerning Web3. So all the different innovations and all the different companies and actors are coming in the same direction to make the creation in general easier, meaning that today, if I want to build a game, it's very difficult. Either I have to learn about Unity or Unreal, or I have to really use some other, or I have to build my own game engine, right? But tomorrow, with the democratization of the creation tool, of 3D tools, it's going to be more and more easy to generate the virtual world and to enjoy the virtual world that the others create in a very easy way as well. So what I want to say is, from a creation perspective and from a distribution perspective, the innovations are coming. Either the distribution way or VR headset, or let's say in Ready Player One, I forgot how many. Ready Player One, you have this all headset and the suit and every machine, and either that version, or either with holograms, or with some other new connected technology we're gonna see. But in the end, as I already mentioned, it's about how people are going to interact with each other, and it's about the story and the capacity and the power you are giving to the normal user, maybe like my mom or my grandma, like this kind of people.
Thanks, Yingzi. Speaking about the normal user, we have a lot of users out there watching us, and we have questions from them. Christiane has the question, so let's see what Christiane in our control room has to say from you out there, guys.
Which blockchain will rule the metaverse?
No big explanation, just a name.
Alex.
Yeah.
I hate this question. It's hard to answer.
Think about our headliner tonight, but feel free to answer anything.
It's really hard to answer because everything is fluid, and we're in a very early stage of adoption. We still have a few 100 million users, quote unquote, holding any crypto assets, but that is different from people interacting with these systems on a daily or monthly base.
Name?
So the name today, I would say it's Ethereum, just because it has the strongest developer ecosystem, network effects, tooling, standards around it, but it has its issues. So
Ethereum, Lili, yeah.
Probability weighted. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm moving to kind of like an interchain person, but originally I'm an ETH maxi, so I would say Ethereum. Also, one point to actually think about, I think in terms of adoption, is it's not only just about the number of nodes or number of participants or developers or apps, right? I mean, of course, that's super important. But one point to mention is that it's basically a culture, right? And to build a culture for like any basically network is just very, very hard and very difficult. And I think so far, when we compare Bitcoin culture and Ethereum culture, is very different. Simply because you can build a lot of things on Ethereum, there is smart contract technology. And so there's, it is a network in itself, but it's a kind of place where people come together and, let's say like build something in a hackathon, right? And that's kind of the sentiment. And that's why I think, I believe this is going to be one of the coolest chain from now.
Yeah, hard question. So I would say it really depends on the definition and the version of metaverse. I would say maybe a short answer would be, if it is like a decentralized metaverse, I would put my bet maybe on Ethereum. And if it is less decentralized metaverse, but it can scale easily, it may be some others, maybe Solana, or maybe the upcoming next big one. We're still pretty early in the game, right? So sometimes maybe Vitalik is talking about it right now, but we can't sometimes have all the elements together in the same thing.
Or it's even a combination of various protocols. So I could imagine a world where the larger transactions, larger values settle on Ethereum, and smaller scale microtransactions, whatever there is with less value to protect, might end up on other chains. But it's all in flux.
The diplomatic answer, but it's very open. Christiane, one more question from the audience. I know that you have many lined up. We won't make them all, but we try to take as many as possible.
Yes, if we have one more, that's a very hard choice because all of them are very good, and we will do our best to answer all of them on the 1in9 website. But let's take in one more. So the question is, will existing corporations change, or are we heading into disruption of the concept of legal organizations such as the GmbH, the German GmbH, through protocols and networks where profits are spread instead of concentrated? So disruption or change, that's the question.
In companies. Why not starting with a person who's working for an existing major corporation?
Well, on the record or off the record?
I guess we are on the record.
Of course.
No, we're totally off the record here.
So, as I mentioned, especially, for example, let's take the example of gaming industry. A lot of traditional, let's say, gaming companies, publishers, developers, they are trying to adopt Web3 elements, and of course NFT, and trying to know the whole logic and how to make it integrate into their current methodology and way of work. which is a good thing, because if they are moving, they are also bringing in more developers to learn how to use the tools, what is actually Ethereum, what is actually Solana, and how to build things on it, right? And that is one part of it. At the same time, the Web3 people, the Web3 companies, they are trying to go fast. And because they're newcomers, they have the resources, they have the users that are based on their protocol, and they are moving faster than the traditional bigger machines. So they can disrupt the traditional players either in gaming industry or in some other sectors. And it's very funny because that's exactly the question that I'm asking myself, and I was discussing having this debate actually with my friends, either from gaming background or from Web3 background, and a lot of people have different answers. So I actually launched a poll on LinkedIn to my community and to some other people. For now, I already have 130 answers, I guess, and it's ending in 5 days. So they can either vote traditional video game giant are gonna take the space, or social media company like Meta, or Web3 natives can take over the space. So I put my bet on Web3. So that's my answer, I guess.
And so far, what's the result? Who's kind of trending?
So far, video game giant and Web3 native platform are winning, are almost the same. So it's not the end yet.
Interesting.
I think it really depends on the use case. So if you look at these DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, those are new forms of organizations that live purely on the internet, and which have a set of rules, say for governance or certain activities, shuffling around assets or value, providing any kind of service in a fully programmatic way. And this kind of concept works particularly well where you have exclusively digital fields of activity. So in those areas, I could imagine this concept really taking off, and we are seeing it already in the early days of DeFi particularly. And whenever you have a physical component where you need to enforce rights, particularly in the physical world, for example, where you have real world assets such as real estate involved or real world commodities, the whole endeavor becomes way more complex. And in those areas, I'd be skeptic to see any profound innovation around organizational design in the next 1 or 2 decades even.
Maybe as a follow-up to this question, because with the users becoming more sovereign in this space, the states are challenged to keep the control across all the different industries, either gaming or finance as well. How do you see that play out?
The role of governments.
Yeah, so that's a very, very big and almost philosophical question. But
why we chose it as our last one?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I don't think governments or nation states as a concept, as an idea, will go away anytime soon. As there's again, it holds up to the same analogy. There's a lot of stuff we need to govern in the physical world. Public infrastructure, schools, healthcare, citizenship, all of that kind of stuff, criminal law, prisons, etc. That probably won't be governed in the digital realm. But at the same time, there's a subset of public activities, and primarily in legislative procedures and law enforcement, that can be automated, and that is a function that can be run. Yeah, as I said, particularly on-chain through smart contracts, where you have a set of rules that is self-enforcing and baked into code, basically visible and made accountable for everybody to see. So there will be certain aspects, particularly in finance and in money creation. I think actually the first real killer app, if you think of a multi-billion-dollar user base, will be money. I think cryptocurrencies hold the potential to be an 100x better money than any fiat money system we have today. That's maybe another very big question.
But no, let's give Lili the chance to talk about The disruption of governments and corporations, whatever, choose one.
I have a very dystopic view on this, that I think one day we will have two versions of governments, like one in the for the physical world and one in the virtual world. And this is because there was actually a research saying that the metaverse, basically the virtual world and the physical world, these type of worlds, they serve different psychological needs. So for the virtual world, a lot of people are using it for example, like instant pleasure. They're using it to express themselves, or some use it to be liberated from the social norms, right? So you have something in the real world that you feel unhappy with, and you go into this new virtual world, you can create a new identity and you can live on that, right? But then on the other hand, you think of the psychological need of the real world. There has been a research saying something like, popularity, influence, competence, security is much more extensively visible, basically, in the real world. And I think based on these different psychological needs of human beings, there needs to be different sets of rules to govern it. I totally agree that currency is basically a killer app of the cryptocurrency, right, or of the metaverse. But then somehow I would kind of think that would be like so many new use cases that basically it wouldn't make sense anymore for monetary system that we have in the real world to be adapted into that, because it's a totally different thing. And so we would need to have, like a set of framework that is specifically designed for that. So I don't think they're going to be able to catch up. I think the only way that they would be able to catch up is to create a new type of government that would, make sense in the other world.
Thank you so much. Oh, unfortunately, we are out of time. That was really amazing. Thank you so much, Alex, Lili, Yingzi.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
So
Thanks.
Wolfgang, what do you think? Are we going to live? Do you want to live in a metaverse?
Yeah, we decided that we're gonna think about it. Well, I'm pretty amazed by the idea and all the possibilities. The last dystopian thing about the difference of governing the metaverse makes me kind of, a bit chill down my back. But I think the idea and the vision is great, and the chance to rebuild the internet that somehow feels like the good old days.
The future will be what we want it to be, right? So
Absolutely.
we are
That's why
there to build
what
it.
this event
That's
is
a good
about.